Watershed, and it's time, folks. Time for the show. Let's be reasonable. This show is dedicated to the hardworking American people who make it happen day after day, night after night. This is a country that doesn't sleep, right? So they don't have time to watch the news. They don't have time to figure out what's going on in politics. I mean, they hear a lot of stuff, but they really don't have a whole lot of time in order to really digest it and decipher it and make some quality decisions, right? So that's up to us. That's our job, this show. This show is dedicated to them in order to let them know what they should be thinking. And hopefully we're providing a different point of view, how to look at things, how we should be doing things. Well, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch. But anyway, this show is dedicated to you, the hardworking American people. That being said, it's also the weekend, so it's time, folks. It's time to talk about the top 5 news stories of the week. And again, it's not our goal in order to hold you long, but it's hopefully we say something that you do like. So coming in at the number 5 spot in our show, we have to talk about these 14th Amendment cases that are making their way. Yes, that's right, making their way through and to the Supreme Court. Remember, we started with Minnesota last week. The Minnesota Supreme Court decided they didn't want to hear this case. No, get this case out of here. They were like, no, we're not hearing this case. It's not up to us in order to make the decision. So they are going to allow the plaintiffs to kick that case on up the road, and hopefully it makes its way to the appellate process, the civil circuit court process, in order to make its way to the Supreme Court. Also, during this week, we learned from the state of Colorado, the judge in this case agreed with the Trump administration that they are allowed to be on the ballot. She did, you might say, chastise the president in the fact that she believed that he did commit insurrection. However, she said that the 14th Amendment, Section 3, does not pertain to the President of the United States. It pertains to other officers, including the House of Representatives, the Senate, and other members that take the oath of office. In fact, she indicated that the oath of office taken by the President is different from that oath that is taken by other members under that presidency. So that being said, interesting, right? And after rereading it, I have to say, well, I think she makes a valid point. So even if this does make its way to the Supreme Court, I imagine that the Supreme Court will probably echo what her comments were. The fact that the language does not include the President of the United States, even though the language does indicate officers, right? And most people would consider that the presidency is an officer. It is clear that the president does take a different oath of office. So that being said, we'll see where this case ends up, but they are moving forward. Remember, there are about 12 other states. I think Michigan is up next, right? But there are about 12 other states that are going to hear this 14th Amendment challenge, and we'll see exactly how it turns out. I think eventually there probably should be some type of, I think it's called an amicus brief. That is a brief filed by a citizen, heard by a member of the Supreme Court community, and then this amendment this brief makes its way to the Supreme Court justices, and they issue an opinion on it, and it comes back, and that becomes a law of the land, so to speak. Not the law of the land, but that would be the rendered precedence on the issue. So, and I would imagine this probably ends up right in the lap of Congress. Once again, it would be up to Congress in order to amend the 14th Amendment in Section 3. Maybe they want to include language that specifically indicates a president, right? So we'll see how that ends up. And remember, if it does require an amendment, it will also require ratification by 2/3 of the states. So that being said, probably a long and arduous, you know the word I'm using. Anyway, a long process that will be in place in order to change the 14th Amendment to include the president. Anyway, so that is the number 5 story, 14th Amendment cases moving forward, but looks like it favors Donald Trump. On to the number 4 case. The number 4 story, I should say, is Joe Biden. Joe Biden met with Xi Jinping this week. So Chinese relationships with the United States maybe got a smidge better, right? They had some things on the table that they were able to get some agreements to, right? They agreed that they would together tackle the challenges brought by AI, right? They agreed that they would have some military uh, discussions, or the deconfliction channel would be open so we can determine what incidents are taking place and whether they're meant to be hostile, and there and thus so forth. So remember the balloon incident, we didn't know how to read that, and the Chinese weren't picked up the phone in order to figure out what was going on. So we got some agreement there. And also, we got an agreement that the Chinese would assist us with the fentanyl crisis here in the United States. Now, I got to tell you, I am skeptical on their help and assistance when it comes to the fentanyl issue. And I say them, I'm talking about the Chinese. I'm skeptical as to what they will be doing in order to assist us. I am skeptical on their approach to assisting us with AI. China is our adversary. I know that in certain respects they are an economic partner, because we do get a ton of imports from China, right? But China sees the world a lot different than the United States does, right? So in certain respects, I don't know exactly what type of help they're actually going to be rendering us that will be beneficial. And I'm not sure exactly how do we even track the progress of said help. So that's going to be hard to bite. Now, I will tell you the things that were not on the table that I do find interesting, and I get it. I mean, we haven't had rosy relationships, and we're just kind of putting our toe back in the water in order to kind of open these relationships. But I'm concerned, or I wouldn't say really concerned. Maybe I should say it's interesting, I would say, that we didn't hear anything about the tariffs. Remember the tariffs, the Trump tariffs that were put in place in 2017 and 18. Biden nor Xi Jinping brought that up, so obviously it's not that big of an issue to either one of them, right? But it should be an issue, and it is an issue for the American people, because it actually ends up affecting all of us in this country. Now, I'm not getting down on people who have had issues with fentanyl. I'm not saying I don't feel the empathy in my heart for family members who've had to deal with it, but I am saying that the issue of the tariffs affect everybody in the United States. Not only does it affect us, it affects China too. You can see that happening in their economy. And, to see Xi Jinping leave the meeting with the president and run out and tell the American business community that China is open for business, I mean, at some point, it really looks like business as usual, right? And standing ovation, from what I heard, standing ovation from American business. China is open for business. That's not a good thing. It's my contention that we missed the boat. We should have settled on the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, that we had embarked on with the Obama administration. We should have settled on getting corporations out of China. This would have been 2013, 14, right? 15. Get those corporations out of China. And, remember Trump issued an order telling U.S. corporations to leave China, but they're still there, right? So it's imperative for us to sever that relationship. And I got to tell you, here's my solution. So you heard it here first. My solution to this, remember we have a problem on our southern border, all right? Now, remember also that the problem that you have on the southern border is because of all the chaos that exists in Central America in particular, right? Which I will also say that one of the reasons why we have a ton of chaos in Central America is because of all of the BS that we did during the late 70s and early 80s. There's that. Okay, so that being said, ton of chaos down there. Why not make the Americas, North America, Central America, South America, why not make the Americas a big trading bloc? right? Move all of that stuff out of China and maybe put some of it over in the Pacific, but move the majority of it back to the Americas. The Americas is your likely partners and most logical partners. Reasonable. That's a reasonable solution. And that allows us to get cheaper goods when we need them. But it also allows us to be able to pivot and start doing things that we need to do. I mean, I got to tell you, we haven't been to space in the way that we should have been since the 1980s, right? We pretty much just left space. After, what was it, Apollo? Hell, we haven't done anything. But that's where all the promise is. All the future GDP, it's going to come out of there. It's going to come out. You know what? So I would be saying to myself, look, move everything to the Americas, set up a new trading agreement or a block with the Americas. We can get cheaper goods instead of getting them from importing with China. Import from these Central American companies. It would keep them from running across the border and running into the United States, right? If they have something to do back home, that's their issue. There's nothing to do there. So there's no money to be made there, right? So they're coming to the United States. Stop them from coming. Make them a partner. Make these governments a partner in the American experience. It's the Americas. Anyway, I'm going too far. But anyway, that's my solution. But China and America, we do have a relationship today. Tariffs are still on the table. So, and remember, tariffs, the way it's been reported by several different news organizations and think tanks, the tariffs impact prior to the Trump tariffs. Now, that doesn't mean, just remember, we had tariffs in place before the Trump tariffs, but the tariffs that were in place prior to the Trump team actually made up about 2% of the cost of goods and services goods that made it into the United States. Now these Trump tariffs are fourfold, something like 11, 12%. So the cost of those tariffs are definitely impacting the American people. Now, if you heard an earlier program that was like 9 minutes, right? Jesus Christ, that was a short period of time. But anyway, I told you during that 9 minutes that the inflation that we feel in this country is one part stimulus, that what we did when we basically we spent a ton of money with the Trump team and with the Biden team in order to try to make the American people whole during COVID and after, right? So we spent a ton of money. So that's the stimulus portion. The stimulus portion got us to like 9% when it came to measuring inflation. And we really want to target a 2%. So getting back down to 2%, we're now at 3.7, 3.5%. My contention is the second part of the inflation is the tariffs, the cost of those tariffs. And those tariffs, it will make it difficult for us to get back to that 2% number, right? Without a lot of pain and angst, because I think from this point forward, we'll probably see the economy start to slow down. My attention. Just what I see. When I look at the numbers coming out this month, when I look at jobs, they're down. The numbers there. When I look at consumer confidence, the Michigan report doesn't trend well in the right direction. The inflation number looked pretty good, right? But what we're trying to get a gauge on today is the impact that the American consumer is seeing. Is it forward looking for us, or is it in the rear view mirror, right? Because the inflation number is coming down. It should be better for the American people going forward, but we don't know where we are in that continuum. Are we looking backwards or are we looking forward? We need to figure that out, and we will figure that out with the data, right? But again, I'm making the point that I think there were opportunities that were lost, but in reality, when dealing with the Chinese, we're probably just tiptoeing into that space because we haven't had good working relationships for quite some time. So anyway, I'm off of that point. That's the number four story, the number four story, U.S. relations with China may be a smidge better. We'll see what happens. In the number three spot, folks, let's talk about GM, Stellantis, and Ford, the big three, and the UAW contract. It finally made its way through ratification by the membership. It has been ratified, but by a narrow majority. So the members really weren't that high on this deal. Now, the deal did bring them a 25% pay increase, right? It did bring them some other smaller pieces, but for the most part, membership wanted some more stability when it comes to retirement and a few other issues, of which they didn't get that deal. So there's some scuttlebutt that, well, I mean, there may be some way for them to de-ratify this deal. I won't tell you where I heard that from, but there are enough people who aren't happy, and they were saying that there were some groups that participated in the vote count that were not union shops. But that's interesting, so to speak. So you got a deal, and I thought Fame did. They did for the money that the big three were giving them, I think they worked within the space that they had to work with. Getting a pay raise. Now, and part of that is for the pay raise was really good for people who were hiring in, but for people who had seniority and been there for a while, it really doesn't benefit them that much. But gotta tell you, topping out at like $40 an hour, with the overtime, I think these people are definitely making $100,000 or better. And guess what? Again, that's a good thing, because actually, I think that's what the median income of this country should be, in my opinion. But so anyway, they got a deal. It got ratified. There are some people who aren't happy. There are some things that they could be doing. I mean, most people wanted to go back to some type of pension scheme. There is a way to do the pension scheme. I haven't heard anybody discuss it yet, but there is a way to do that. In order to make it palatable for not only the big three, but also to the UAW. But, I don't know if they're talking about that or not, but there's a way. But anyway, so this deal's done. The money is on the table and into the union worker families' pocketbooks. That's all good. And remember, this kind of fits the motif for Joe Biden when he's talking about Bidenomics and growing the economy from the middle out, looking at those middle class incomes, increasing those incomes, and that will do more in order to grow the economy that will be beneficial to everyone. We'll see how that pans out, right? We haven't done an episode on whether or not Bidenomics is working, but we plan on doing that in a future episode, probably by itself, because there's a lot that has happened since October and into the month of November. But anyway, UAW contract done. These people are relatively happy. We'll see what happens on the other side. And this is a 4-year deal. So next contract, we'll see what comes out of it. But this could be a building block too. Building block for the next deal, but it also is a building block to maybe relationships with Toyota, Nissan, with Tesla. You name it. There are so many different relationships the UAW could be cultivating because of getting this deal done today. So my hat's off to them once again for the deal. I know you don't get everything, but sometimes get what you can get and be able to position yourself for the next deal. So that being said, that's the number 3 story. In the number 2 spot, we got to talk about the CR, the continued resolution. It did pass. Guess what? It passed the House and it passed the Senate, and the president signed off on it on Friday. A lot got done, right? And remember where we started. We started with the ouster of Kevin McCarthy because he relied on Democrats in order to get this deal done, right? And then we saw Kevin McCarthy get ousted. Then we saw 3 other people in for the running. And it got kind of comical, right? It got comical because the Jim Jordan bloc and the Freedom Caucus group, they were sending out death threats. If you didn't vote for Jim Jordan, then you were pie scum, and we were going to do all types of things to you and your family and the rest of it. The other 2 didn't really stand too much of a chance at all, Scalise and Tom Emmer, right? So we settled on Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson, guy from Louisiana, become speaker. His first assignment, get the CR done. And poof, lo and behold, he's able to get the CR done. Now, a lot of people don't like Mike Johnson. They don't like Mike Johnson, probably more so because of his religious convictions, right? Evangelical guy. It is what it is, people. All right, so he's evangelical. They believe certain things that the majority of, I would say, a good portion, not a majority, but a good portion of Americans don't believe, right? So that being said, it is what it is, right? Until it ain't. In this case, Mike Johnson's there. I told you I didn't think that he was going to make it out of the month of December. I reserve the right to revise and or extend my remarks, right? Because he could make it out of the month of December because really there's no more business left for this year. You got all the holidays coming up. There's no more business left. So he makes it into the first quarter of next year. He has a CR to two bills, really, one in January and another in February to bring up in order to fund portions of the government. So we'll see exactly where that is up. If I were a betting man, they get those done too, right? That pushes us into the month of June. They vote for another CR in June. That gets us right up to the election. And then we'll see what happens from there, right? So again, sets up to be a very busy year when it comes to the congressional calendar and CRs. And remember, a CR, continued resolution, isn't a budget. We haven't done a budget since 1997. And that budget happened to be a balanced budget, right? And that created a surplus, right? But we haven't seen it since. but it's really strange. I'm not gonna anyway. So if you really follow that story, that's pretty strange too. But my point is, Mike Johnson turns out to be the hero. He saves the CR. It kicks it down the road and strategically puts the American House of Representatives and Republicans in particular on a little bit better footing than they had before. Now, that doesn't say anything about the infighting because it's still there. And it doesn't say that things aren't comfortable because you saw with Senator Mullins, him and the Teamster guy wanting to fight each other. And Bernie Sanders came to save the day. Say, hey, Mullins, sit down somewhere. You were acting like a person that's beneath the office of which he holds. He's not acting like a U.S. Senator, right? So, man, remember, it's the Teamsters, man. I mean, hell, they still haven't found Jimmy Hoffa's body. So there's that. You had Chip Roy on the floor. I think it was maybe Wednesday or Thursday this past week. And he was railing on the fact that Republicans haven't done anything. They haven't done anything this entire Congress. To which I will second his point in that because they really haven't. And remember, their signature piece of business was to do something about the border. Did they do anything about the border? No. Did you see any legislation that made its way from the House of Representatives to the Senate regarding border? No, not there. So, are they really for border protection? I'm going to tell you, no, they're not. And one of the reasons why they're not for border protection, you can tell they're not for it, is because there's no language cracking down on the businesses that hire these people who come in illegally. It's a shell game, people. It's like 3-Card Monte. Nobody knows where it is. They don't want it. That's because the reason why they don't know where it is because they don't want it. All right. So that being said, hey, that's Congress. But anyway, my point is there aren't people happy about the CR. Chip Roy and others, and a lot of the acrimony that you see between members. Oh, I didn't even mention Kevin McCarthy and Tim Burchett from Tennessee. Fisticuffs there. McCarthy said if he did punch him or hit him, elbowing, if he punches anybody, they would know. That's it. These guys are crazy. But at the same time, crazy, but entertaining at the same time. So anyway, all right, so he got a CR done. Great, good on him. All right, folks, guess what? We talked about the 14th Amendment cases making their way to the Supreme Court. We talked about Joe Biden and Xi Jinping in the number 4 spot. We talked about the UAW in the number 3 spot. And of course, we talked about the CR being passed. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, may make it into the beginning of the year as Speaker of the House. And of course, we have to talk about the number 1 story. But before we do, folks, I'm going to ask you, like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Let's grow this channel. I think we have a lot more to say, a lot of good things to tell you. But boy, we want to grow this channel. We want to be, well, a major player. Put it that way. So on to the number 1 story. The number 1 story comes, of course, again from Gaza. Got to talk about Israel and Gaza. Of course, this week, Israel embedded the media into their military, the IFD. And of course, they happened upon a hospital, a major hospital. Remember, it doesn't have any electricity. They don't have any incubators. They don't have, all the things that the medicine and certain things that they need in order to assist the people who are being bombed, right? But the Israelis rolled up on a hospital, and with the embedded journalists, they were able to determine that Hamas was using the hospital as a headquarters. Now, I don't know about you, but I saw the cache of weapons. And I gotta tell you, I have been over to people's homes in the United States who have more weapons than I saw out there. So I'm going to say this. Sure, is Hamas using that location to store weapons? Of course they are. Does it happen to be a headquarters? Maybe a bridge too far, right? But sure, is Hamas using those locations to store weapons? Of course, but let's not oversell it, right? It just proves the point that Hamas is there, all right? And I guess that's the point that you really need to prove. You don't have to tell the American people or anybody else out in the world that this is a headquarters and this is where they do all these sinister things, right? No, don't go that far. Just leave it where it is and say, yeah, they were using this in order to store a cache of their weapons. Which, again, like I said, I've been to people's homes here in the United States who have more weapons than what I saw on the table there. So, all right, that being said, okay, we still are no closer to any type of resolution. Benjamin Netanyahu was on with NPR the other day, and I think it was Steve Inskeep that was asking what's on the other side of this, and who's going to control Gaza. And Benjamin Netanyahu, for all intents and purposes, basically said Israel's going to maintain Gaza. So they leave in 2007. Looks like they'll be back after this conflict or is over. And I gotta, again, I'm uneasy about this. I'm very uneasy about all of this because, I'm not going to try to keep you long, but I want you to understand my unease, right? So I see, and I will tell you, if I were attacked, right? Let's say I was Israel, and if I were attacked, I would have the same response. I will be going after the people who attacked me, right? I'm not quite certain or sure that I would be doing it in the same fashion in which the Israelis are doing it. I would probably be doing it more surgical, like the Americans do it, right? So using special forces and the rest. Because the body count, and I may have said this on a previous broadcast here or there or two or whatever, sometime before, I said there's no doubt in my mind on the other side of this, I thought for certain there would be 1,400 people killed in Israel, but probably somewhere between 20 and 25,000 people killed in Gaza in order to root out Hamas before this is all said and done. Now, other points about Steve Inskeep's comments on NPR with Benjamin Netanyahu. Since Israel would be the new occupier, it makes it tough, I think, on relations with other Arab countries, in my estimation. And I gotta tell you, that puts us right back in a spot that I think only makes the conflict over there just kind of fester that much more. And most people will say, well, Israel, they got out of Gaza in 2007. But I'm going to tell you, they still had their pulse, their finger on what was going on in Gaza. They still controlled the movements of those Palestinian people. And I think that's where part of the angst and complaints come from that you see from, and this is not just left, it's right as well. But that's the complaint. You see Israel's response to this. You don't see them actively trying to find a partner. I mean, they're trying to solidify partnerships with the Saudis, the UAE, and other members of the Arab nations, but not their next door neighbor. And I get it. Your next door neighbor is the one that's lobbing rockets into your living room. I get it. And you can't work with Hamas. We get that too. But at the same time, I think the American people, and there are a number of people around the world who don't want to see the wholesale destruction of the Palestinian people. That's the problem. So, and again, on the other side of this, I don't think that Israel occupying Gaza is the best solution. Israel doesn't want a two-state solution. Israel doesn't want peacekeeping troops in that area. Right? So that just means that this whole issue becomes that much more chaotic. I saw a story, maybe it was about a week and a half ago. There was a gentleman who went to school in Israel, and there were some Palestinian guys who went to school with him. This was about 40 years ago. And that guy was Jewish. The other two guys that I mentioned were Palestinian. He leaves Israel, goes back or goes to the United States, and has a flourishing career over the next 40 years. At the same time, these two individuals who are left in Gaza, they can't leave. They're not allowed to leave, right? So Israel will not allow them to leave. They're stuck there. They take these other jobs. They're not happy. He finds these two individuals on a refugee list and flies over to Israel during this conflict in order to speak with them. And of course, they're telling this gentleman their story about how they weren't able to leave, how all of their movements were restricted, they're searched, and things that they bring to things that come from the United States to Gaza, they're inspected. Some of that merchandise is stolen, and some other things that were brought. And I may be getting that story mixed up with another story. But anyway, my point is, it's hard for the Palestinian people to settle on self-reliance, self-determination, when their movements are restricted. And you don't see the willingness of the Israeli people, or Israeli government, not the people, but the Israeli government, to really be in a place where they're looking for a partner, right? But they're willing to bomb the hell out of them, right? So I think that's where we are. I mean, look, folks, I'm not down on Israel. They have a right to self-determination too. So, just we're in a bad spot. I don't know how many times I've said that, but I've probably said that maybe 3 or 4 times now when they make it into the top 5. We're in a bad spot in this situation. I don't know how this ends, but on the other side of it, I just still see conflict. I don't see this getting better because I don't think Israel's going to change their position. And I think since Israel's not changing their position, they're still putting this pressure, this upward pressure that the Palestinian people are feeling. So they end up creating more groups, and maybe it's not Hamas, right? Maybe it's, I don't know, call it whatever you want to call it. But it just is another group that ends up hating Israel that much more, which ultimately leads to more bloodshed. I think that's what's on the other side of this. Just more bloodshed. But anyway, folks, that's the number one story. That story, we've got to do better. We just got to do better. And there's got to be better solutions. And everybody has to be on board with solutions. But right now, it's clear that, hell, nobody wants solutions. Everybody wants bombs. Everybody wants destruction. And that's sad. Because we could be doing so many other things that are beneficial. But anyway, hey, folks, that's the number one story, folks. Hey, like and subscribe once again. This show's over for the evening, but I want you to start thinking, hey, comments, what do you think we should be talking about, right? What are things that you want to hear about? And again, we want it to be politics related as well as 2024 election related. Because there are a lot of different stories out there. There's a lot that we look at throughout the week. We is me and the mouse in my pocket. That we look at during the week that look like interesting stories as well. And I got to tell you, I mean, some of these stories are just, really make you scratch your head as to say, what is going on in this country? It's a mess. But anyway, and it really is a mess. I got to tell you, I can't think of one agency, one thing that's going the way it's supposed to go in this country. And I may be more cynical about that. Maybe I'm not being reasonable. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough. Maybe I'm just assessing it based on how I feel, not necessarily looking at the evidence on the ground. But anyway, just seems like everything is just in a mess. And we need to be doing better in this country. But anyway, so like and subscribe. Tell me what you want to talk about. Tell me what you think about the show. And most importantly, I want you guys to go out, enjoy what's left of your weekend. And we look forward to seeing you next week.